In this video, we're going to be breaking down the new pro meta in Overwatch 2, and it's freaking insane. There's so many powerful compositions that you can try out in your own rank games for crazy effect, and we're going to talk about all the variations and tips and tricks for every single one of them. So do me a huge solid and smash that like and subscribe if you enjoy the content. Private coaching will be in the description down below, and we're going to jump into the video. Now, the first type of composition is incredibly powerful, and I actually think that you can whip it out in rank to pretty good effect, and it's a brawl composition centering primarily around Mei and Rein. The composition in question is going to be a Mei, Bap, Rein, Lucio brawl composition, where 4 of these characters walk together, work together, and you're trying to find a value wall, push your advantage with Reinhardt, and of course, Lamp is going to bail you out of any sticky situation, allow you to overextend or extend into a fight more, have more sustain, and essentially, you're also trying to set up some combos, right? Like the Amplification Matrix Fire Strike combo for some kills on some squishies, or we speed in our Rein to help him engage, or to enable a shatter. This is the core composition and a really, really powerful one. Now, you might be asking, okay, what about the 5th character? What is the 5th character in this composition? And that's the thing, this character could be a ton of different things. Most of the time, it's defaulting to Cassidy, because Cassidy gives you a good amount of burst damage, breaking lamps, right-clicking Rein shield to generate advantage, and getting pickoffs on inting Lucio's, but he's also a counter pick if the opponents go like a Far Mercy, hypothetically. With Cassidy, all of a sudden, that matchup becomes a lot easier. Now, you don't have to play Cass. You could play something that can generate value from a further distance. Think Sojourn and Hanzo. Hanzo, in particular, though, is a character that might even play really far away from the rest of the brawl in a mirror. So let's say your core brawl is fighting the enemy core, and then the Hanzo goes and flanks really far right or really far behind. You might be thinking, Hanzo's not really a flank character, right? But the thing is, when you're up against a brawl, they don't have the means to just pivot and go after this Hanzo. The Hanzo could typically get away in time, not to mention the rest of the core will punish this sort of movement, and if Hanzo gets to get out free shots from afar, typically they'll generate some sort of advantage. Now, the other 2 DPS that are primarily played in this composition is Sim. Sim's going to help you win the brawl matchup a lot of the times. It's going to help put a lot of pressure on Rein. You can do some plays with your teleport, enabling you to transverse through the map and route in really weird places. And in the brawl mirror, a Sim wall is basically a one fight without counter ults, and unlike many of the other DPSs like Hanzo's Dragon Strike or High Noon, these ultimates don't hold a candle to the power of Sim wall as far as team fight closing power. And the other DPS that we see play is Bastion. And this is primarily for the mirror. You can break Mei walls very quickly. You can whittle down Rein shields and make them basically non-existent, so your Rein could get easy and free shatters. And in the mirror, there's no nades that you have to play around or chain CCs of any kind that's really going to punish you. So Bastion is that weird but very powerful pick that you can throw into this comp. The next composition that we're seeing both in Pro AMs and in League Overwatch League codes is the pretty classic poke composition, double sniper. Typically on the sniper maps is where we're seeing it. Widow, Hanzo, Sigma, and then one of the 3, Ana, Zen, and Bap. Now, I'm sure that there have been some games that have some Mercy seeing play just because it's a good enabler to the res, but I didn't see any myself. I just imagine that there probably are some. Of course, I haven't seen every single one of them, but basically they always had a Zen. So it's like either Zen Ana or Zen Bap most of the time is what I've seen. And of course, that makes a lot of sense. Zen has pickoff potential with volleys, not to mention you don't need a crazy amount of heals in a composition like this. You would much rather have poke potential, pick potential, and yeah, double sniper Zen, Sigma is kind of the core of this composition more than anything else. Now, this composition is really gonna only be powerful on the long distance maps with long sight lines, so think Circuit Royale, or we specifically talked about Junkertown, and Havana would probably be another one as well, certain times on the map. Now, this doesn't mean that this is the most dominant, and there are a lot of counter strategies. There are dive-centric strategies that really work in pro play that kind of counter this, so it's not like you have to play this composition on these maps. In fact, there's a lot of other compositions that see play, even on maps like Junker Queen, which we'll talk about in a second, but this composition is really powerful. And remember, the idea of poke is to keep your distance, make sure that you never allow a brawl or a dive to get near you for free, and try to generate some pick oriented value with cross angles from Widow and Hanzo. And typically, without a certain amount of practice, this is going to be the easiest composition to play in ranked ladder. Just having a Sigma double sniper, it's a composition that you see a lot in ladder. It's really powerful based off of a lot of the power level of Widowmaker, and it doesn't really rely on the same level as synergy as a brawl or a dive, because you don't have to call targets or anything like that. It's primarily just a composition of attrition. Now, the next composition that we got to talk about is a composition that might look a bit familiar because it was seeing a lot of play in Overwatch League Season 1 of Overwatch 2, but it has a couple of differences. And this is a Winston, Sojourn, Tracer, Kiriko, Lucio composition, and it's primarily played on, well, a lot of maps, a lot of push maps in particular. Coliseum is one of the ones that it's played on a lot, and we've seen a ton of gameplay of that. But it sees play on Queen Street as well, and probably just a ton of maps it's going to end up seeing play on. And it's really powerful, and you might look at this comp and say, hey, that's a bit similar to the composition that we saw before that had like 100% pick rate, but the Tracer was not Tracer, it was Reaper. And that's true. Now, Tracer is just filling in the spot for Reaper because of a couple of reasons. I think Tracer's overall more powerful, Sojourn a little bit less so, and honestly, it just makes way more sense to play Tracer rather than Reaper. Well, Reaper is good in the head-to-head between Reaper and Winston. He doesn't really play incredibly well comparatively to everything that a Tracer can pull off as far as baiting off cooldowns, punishing the use of cooldowns by the enemy team, catching enemies off guard or out of position, and just actions per minute. Tracer is just the one. It's just really, really strong. Makes perfect sense for pro play, and Tracer's probably the best DPS right now, so it really makes sense when slotting into this team composition that we would be playing Tracer. Now, this is primarily a dive composition centering around clean engages, and if you played this composition against a non-mirror, it would look pretty similar to a wrapping around the map, trying to set up a good dive as a team. So you're wrapping around the map routing. Maybe the Tracer's not with you, but you're wrapping. You find an out of position character or someone you can go on, and then, you know, the Winston jumps in, the Tracer engages at the same time. The Kiriko might speed you in if it's a full engage, or the Kiriko might even teleport with you if you're doing an all-in dive. The Sojourn's going to rail and can put themselves in a good position with slide. And that's how the composition could hypothetically play in the non-mirror, but we see it most often in the mirror, and typically it's an exchange of resources, trying to find situations where you can bait certain utility by hitting criticals from off angles. Like if Sojourn hits a railgun on somebody and forces some cooldown, maybe it's a recall, maybe it's forcing Suzu, maybe it's forcing an amp, or maybe it's forcing a Winston bubble early, whatever the case may be. And whether Sojourn, Kiriko, these characters can bait it out, Tracer and Winston can look to punish poor use of cooldowns, hypothetically, and then a lot of the engagements are centering around Winston Bubble because it's a really powerful cooldown, and everyone that is around the Winston Bubble gets value. Now, these are the three, like, pretty clear-cut compositions. I would say the Maybap, Rhine, Lucio Brawl, and the Winston, Sojourn, Tracer, Kiriko, Lucio Dive are, like, the most common. But at this moment, the pro meta is not solved because there's a whole other composition which I like to call Weird Dive, where it's either Diva and Ball with a Tracer, almost always a Tracer, and then the support combo is like a weird combination. If you're playing Ball, you can play like Zen Brig. I've seen Zen Ana, I've seen Brig Ana, I've seen Ana Kiriko. I mean, yeah, you gotta get the picture. There's just like a really weird suite of interchangeable supports that provide something and lose something, or rather it hasn't been solved what the most optimal pick is, mainly because some of these picks are going to be better against certain mirror compositions and certain non-mirror compositions dependent. Now, as far as the second DPS, sometimes we see Widow, sometimes we see even Cass with a dive, or at least we've seen some pros play that, which maybe just speaks to the power level of Cass playing in a non-dive composition, but he typically plays with the Diva, not the Ball. And then we see Sombra for like an anti-Ball tech is what it mainly looks like. And then sometimes we'll see Ball Far Mercy or Diva Far Mercy. So this is like what I call Weird Dive, because there isn't like one set way this composition is built. It's kind of like a build your own dive, and it can kind of go a couple of different ways. We've even seen it occasionally have like a fill-in Doomfist every once in a while, which is very, very uncommon, but a couple of AM teams have tried that and had decent success. So this is a very weird composition, but overall it seems unsolved, and as the meta gets more streamlined, we'll probably see these weird comps get more streamlined as well. Now, we've also seen random Ramatra gameplay in Overwatch League Stream Codes, and we've also seen random Junker Queen gameplay in some AMs, and we've seen success and failures with both. But really what I would say is that the meta seems to be unsolved, and I think that there is enough variation right now that we haven't seen in quite some time. The dive composition doesn't look strong enough to power through brawl on the good brawl maps. And it seems that the poke composition is actually pretty decent on the long distance maps, but not the only composition you could play, where we're seeing some amount of ball, zen, dive every once in a while, and some combination of that and counters of that. And then the Season 1 Winston, Sojourn, Kiriko, Lucio, Tracer dive is seeing a substantial amount of play, but like it's not taking over the entire meta, and it seems like there's enough power level in different parts of other characters that it's not the only dive you can play. So in a situation right now where 3 different dive tanks are semi-viable, Sigma is somewhat viable, Ryan is somewhat viable, and we're seeing various random Ramatra Queen and Doom play every once in a while. And there's overall a lot of characters being played, a lot of character diversity, and it's freaking cool. It's cool right now. Now, this might not stick forever, but right now the pro meta is kind of scary because you never really know quite what to expect. But anyways, let me know what you think about the new pro meta and the compositions that are seeing play. How do you expect the comps to move as we go forward? And are you excited to watch pro play in Overwatch? Let me know. But smash the like and subscribe if you enjoy the content. Thank you so much for coming by, and I'll see you next time.